the forest, that's a word on trees.
More and more. Every day, we are living in a binary choice world. It's time for the middle ground with Ben.
Yes. Welcome to the middle ground for our next episode. And today, I'd like to go into yet another controversial subject, maybe even more mainstream than the last one, because the shape of the earth is not something that usually gets debated, but something that gets debated on a day-to-day basis between person to person. And this often goes towards the political leanings that you have. Whether you're Republican or Democrat usually determines how you feel about this one. I want to talk about abortions. Yes, abortions. Whether a woman should have a right to terminate a pregnancy at any point or at a certain point or at all. Let's go ahead and take a look at a few different randomly selected websites. Like I said, I didn't, and I never will actually go handpick one of these specifically to be perfect or anything. I'm just going to look at the ones that I first find on a web search, and we're going to go from there. And like we did on the last one, I'm going to go ahead and commentate on anything I notice from what it's saying in the article. And I will not forget to name the website before I start talking about it, just so I can give them proper credit. I will say that I'm not saying that any one of these websites between the two sides of this are correct in their assessment. I'm not going to suggest that you should believe any one of these two websites for the content. So something I should have said before, but I think you got the hint on the last episode. Do your own research, like I have said before. Come to your own conclusions. Do not trust me. Never trust me. Never trust anyone at all for what they tell you. Make up your own mind. Okay, so with that being said, let's take a look at the first viewpoint on this, which would be the pro life stance, I guess you would say, the anti-abortion. And let's go ahead and take a look here, and let's make sure that I actually have that one up before I switch to this. Okay, here we go. I think that's the one. Okay, there we go. Okay. So they have number 10, and I think I'm doing a number 10, like a top 10 here, like I did before. Makes it nice and easy. While they are rare, there are still health risks that come with getting an abortion. If something goes wrong, bleeding or infection might occur. There have been some instances of septic shock caused by abortion, too, which can be life-threatening. In some cases, abortions have had harmful psychological effects, such as depression. All right, well, I can't speak to the physical aspects of that, but let's grant them that those are correct. If an abortion is done correctly, in the majority of the cases, I would say that you should not have to worry about bleeding or infection. Like if you have a good doctor that's going to perform the procedure for you. I think they're talking about, I think they go, if something goes wrong. If something goes wrong. That's like when they try to sell you insurance for cars. If your car gets into an accident, then you have to pay this premium just to make sure, in case that happens, then you have to pay a deductible. It's just a just in case. So we're talking worst case scenario on the physical aspects. But I can understand this mental thing. Like, obviously, I'm not a girl. I'm not a woman, okay? But I can imagine you have this being inside of you, right? and it's taken out of you, there might be a psychological aspect to this where you start to regret the decision. You might start to think you've terminated a life inside of you, which you really have, to be completely blunt about it. The being inside of you is alive before you terminate it. So I can get that. So I can get depressed about this sort of thing. However, if you are a woman, and I don't want to get too far ahead here, I'm just thinking based on what I feel about this. If you are a woman who has been raped by a guy and you're pregnant because you've been raped and you're going to terminate that pregnancy, I can understand why you may not feel anything about it. But if it's like a man that you loved, right? And you've had relations with that man, but you didn't intend a pregnancy and you got one anyway, and you want to abort it, you might have some feelings about that. I would think it's less likely that you'd have feelings about an abortion due to a rape. But that's just my outside perspective as a male, not in that situation as a female, trying to look at it from the outside. All right, let's just move on there. I think I've made my point. If I find anything else I want to commentate on, I will do so as usual. You can be both feminist and pro-life. Sometimes people say it's impossible to be feminist who is pro-life, but this simply is not true. Some of the earliest feminists were pro-life, and today you can find a number of pro-life feminist groups. These organizations believe in the main tenets of feminism, but also argue that abortion is yet another sign that women's basic needs are not being met in society. Pro-life feminists seek to end the root causes of abortions and seek to provide practical support for women during pregnancy. Okay, maybe I'm out of touch here, but I don't understand why a feminist would actually advocate an abortion. From my perspective, a feminist would be somebody who is very pro-choice because they are about the empowerment of women, right? They want to give women more power instead of diminish the role that society has given women. They wouldn't want to say a government can tell them you must always have a pregnancy come to term. You must always carry that baby. You could never have a choice. That just doesn't gel with me. So forgive me for not agreeing with number 9. Maybe some feminists might feel that way, but I don't think the majority would. And even if the majority did, it doesn't necessarily make it right, because the majority of anything doesn't make it right. I mean, we can always look at, okay, we take Germany, for example, during World War II. I'd say the great majority of people that were militaristic in that country during World War II would probably be in the Nazi party, right? And if they are the majority, does that mean they are right? I think the majority of us would say no. It's not right to take a bunch of people of the Jewish faith, round them up in concentration camps, and do all those nasty things you've done to them and kill them in, showers, death showers and things like that, execute them. And it's just, okay, you get my point. It's like the majority rule does not necessarily equate to truth or morality. Morality is much more complex than what the majority thinks of it. For instance, if the majority of people thought that it was okay to wantonly just go out and murder needlessly a bunch of people, some of us would think killing people would be wrong, right? There would always be some that would think that. And we would know that taking someone else's life is wrong. I don't think the majority of us are ever going to get to the point where we think it's okay just to go kill people like that. But I think you understand what I'm talking about. So let's move on before we make this episode balloon out too long here. I don't know. This might end up being shorter since I'm not talking so much about it, but we'll see. Okay, so abortion removes potential contributors to society. Celine Dion, Steve Jobs, and Pope John Paul II are a few names among the celebrities who were nearly aborted. By deciding to abort a fetus, a potential person is robbed of a future where they could help improve society. Every child has potential for greatness, and we lose in the end by removing potential contributors to society. All right, well, let me say this. We could also have a situation where we are removing somebody who could be a potential nuisance to society too. What if by aborting a fetus, we have removed the next Adolf Hitler, right, from society? You could go in either direction here. We're going to assume that they could be great in a good way, but we don't pretend to assume they could be bad in the bad way, or contribute in the bad way, rather. Excuse me. But I think you get my point. This point right here is like, maybe they'll be good, and maybe that's why we should keep them, but they're not looking at the opposite side of the coin. However, either way you look at it, that's not necessarily a good point. Should we pretend, or should we not allow someone to be born because they could be bad? Should we not allow someone to be born, or should we kill them and abort them even if they could be good? It's kind of a wash in a sense. You don't know the outcome. So what are they really trying to say in this particular point? Well, from what I can tell, they're talking about only the good aspect. But if we're going to look at it from both sides, I think if we're going to try to find the middle ground right now on this particular point, I would say, if you are not going to abort, you can give someone a chance to present themselves to society and contribute the best way they can. And if they end up being a negative contributor, then that's the way it goes. I don't think we should automatically be robbing people of existence, but I'm not going all pro-life on this necessarily. But I am saying, based on this one point here, I get it, but I can also look at the flip side. So I'm truly in the middle on this one. But I don't think we should just, if we're to take this in isolation, like I said, we shouldn't be just going, okay, looking at it from one side, look at it from both sides and go, well, maybe we should give that fetus a chance to grow up and see how they could be rather than assume they're going to be good or bad. We should at least give them a chance. So I kind of agree with it and I kind of disagree with it. Anyway, I think that's it's enough on that one. I think you get my point there. Millennials are pro-life. Okay. By the title, I don't know what qualifies as millennial. Maybe I am a millennial. But if I am a millennial, I forget what the definition is. But if I were, I'm not necessarily pro-life. So that right there is a misstatement. That's not exactly true. But then again, I might not be millennial anyway. So anyway, it says millennials are one of the most pro-life generations since the 1970s. So if you are millennial and you are supportive of the pro-life movement, you are in good company. Good company. So this insinuates that anybody who is pro-life is good. Anyone who is pro-choice is bad. I haven't really gone into that yet, but I can see both sides of this issue. I'm not like strictly on one side or the other, But I don't think anyone who's pro-choice is necessarily bad. So I don't really like how this is starting off here. Okay? But anyway, it says millennial pro-lifers have done away with the old fire and brimstone rhetoric of previous generations and instead tried to provide love, support, and resources for pregnant women. Okay, there's nothing wrong with providing love, support, and resources for pregnant women, right? I agree with that part. That's cool because everyone needs that, but this is coming with a certain sort of, but you must keep the child alive at all costs. You can't ever have an abortion. That's the, what they call it, the stick. You know, they gave the carrot with the rest of it, but that's the stick. Anyway, furthermore, they use more than theology to justify their positions, with a number of secular humanist, agnostic, and atheistic arguments in favor of pro-life. They are welcoming to people who do not identify with any particular faith. I don't know how to speak for atheists, and I don't know how to speak for agnostics, but agnostics deal with the knowledge subset of the God question, the not knowing. Atheist deals with a certain way of saying, I don't accept your proposition that there is a God because you haven't provided the evidence. I don't think any of us truly know if there's a God. I don't know. This is kind of a digression, but bear with me. But I think most of us can look at the evidence there apparently is and go, that's not enough for me. And then they can go say they're atheist. Some of them might believe what the Bible says and say they're a theist, meaning they believe in theology of some sort. But anyway, enough of the digression. I don't think this point is very persuasive to me because we're talking about generalities here. We're generalizing atheists and agnostics as if that point of view is pro-life, which I can guarantee you not every atheist and agnostic person is going to be pro-life. In fact, I'd be willing to bet they would be more on the pro-choice spectrum because a lot of atheistic and agnostic people tend to be more on the liberal side. I'm not saying it's necessarily everyone, every single person, but that's what I've noticed. And labeling all millennials as pro-life is wrong too. So number 7 is completely something I wouldn't pay attention to if you're going to persuade me. Sorry to say, but no. Okay, number 6. There are resources for women. I'm sure there are. Pregnancy is undoubtedly a difficult time in any woman's life, but there are resources for women which can provide alternatives to abortion. We at Go Life will help you as much as we can during pregnancy. And this website is golife.org, so they're definitely in favor. From ultrasounds to adoption, Go Life will stay by your side every step of the way. Okay, so they're talking about giving you free ultrasounds to show you that you're pregnant and the development of the child. Well, not necessarily free, but they'll give you those. I don't know. Maybe it is, but okay. Adoption. Yes. Okay, so this is something I might agree with, right? If we can take an unwanted fetus and we could somehow allow that fetus to be adopted by someone who wants a child, because there's plenty of women who are barren who cannot have a child, or there's some that are capable of carrying a child but cannot conceive one. Could you take the fetus and transplant it into another woman? Could you do other things? These are good questions. maybe we should give that an opportunity instead of just terminating that fetus. I don't know. It's a good question. So I'm kind of on board with that idea, but I don't think we should force a woman to carry that child to term, especially if it's an unwanted child, like someone who has raped that woman, and that resulting child is going to be the rape child, basically. Now, there are some women who have had this happen to them, who have raised those children and have done so happily, and I congratulate them for having the fortitude to do that, but not every woman's going to want to do that. We can't treat everyone as if they're identical. We are all individuals, and of course, me being a male, I'm not even a part of the group that's going to be involved in the carrying to term of a child, but as trying to hypothetically look at it, I'd say if I were a woman, and I got raped and I got pregnant because of that rape, I would prefer myself to find a way to transplant that child into some woman who might want it before I considered an abortion. But if I couldn't have that option, the abortion, if it were early enough, I think I would do it. That's just me. And what's early enough mean? That's up for debate. I would say if you know you're pregnant within a couple weeks, which I'm not sure if a woman could know within a few weeks, but if they can, then maybe consider to stop it then as early as you can, if you're going to do it. Anyway, just saying, and maybe as a man or a male, I probably don't have the right to speak on this, according to some women, but I'm trying my best to pretend as if I were and look at it from that point of view. And if I put myself in that place, that's what I do. Okay, so number 5. This has got a chart on it, so I'm not going to necessarily look at this and read everything on it, but it talks about abortion rates being lower than ever, right? As of 2017, abortion rates are at a historic low. Well, we are in 2022, so I don't know what it looks like now, but let's take a look at my state of Iowa, for instance. Okay, so the abortion rate in Iowa would be 6.3. What? Okay, I don't know what that rate is, what it actually means, but the total abortions in Iowa are 3,760. The total births are 38,430. And the abortion clinics in Iowa are 8, and the abortion ratio would be 0.0891. Honestly, I have no idea how to read any of that. You would need a comparison to a previous year or something from 2017 to show me the difference. But even if that were true, even if the rates were lower than before, something being lower doesn't necessarily equate to it being right. If, for instance, the number of people that, I can't even think of something on the fly here. I should be able to. If the number of people that purchased, let's say, an iPhone was lower in 2022 than 2021, does that mean the number of people that purchased the iPhone are correct in not purchasing it? Or the people that didn't were correct in not purchasing it? Not necessarily. Maybe they're happy with their previous phone and they're not ready for a new one yet, right? You can't always look at lower numbers equating to good or bad. In the case of abortion, the lower abortions, not necessarily quote unquote good, not necessarily quote unquote bad. Maybe the number of abortions being low is maybe there's been other options that have been explored because you have educated people that there are other options you can partake. And maybe abortions were the last resort, which is kind of my stance already, but I'm not saying that it's necessarily a good thing Anyway, the point is, what they're trying to say doesn't equate to being right. It's not necessarily correct. All right, so we're going to skip over this and not look at the other states. Number 4, you can be proud to be pregnant. I'm sure you can. There's plenty of women who are proud to be pregnant. Very, very happy with that. But that doesn't necessarily equate to, I'm sorry to use the word equate too much, but equal being happy to be pregnant against your will would be a better way to phrase it. Okay, so while pride in pregnancy is something both pro-life and pro-choice supporters can agree on, yeah, just what I was saying, there is undeniably a social stigma attached to pregnancy, especially for a single woman. Is there? I don't know if I agree with that, but maybe there is. I mean, if you're single and you're pregnant, is there a social stigma on that? I think that's pretty much the norm nowadays. There's a lot of single women who raise children, either because the man doesn't stay around or they don't know who the father is sometimes, because sexual promiscuousness, however how you phrase that. Sorry. I think I about nailed it. Nailed it. Okay. Sorry. Sometimes when I speak, I think of a word and then I can't pronounce it, and I think of the wrong word and I say the wrong word, but it's similar to what I'm trying to say. In this case, that's pretty much what happened. Okay. So, point is, women get, for lack of a better term, sexually active. And they have been more active than in the past because we are empowering women to be able to feel like they can have sex with anybody they want at any time, and even do it unprotected if they want to. It's up to them. There are religions that protest against using contraception, things like condoms, and so you have a lot of women that are of the Catholic point of view that don't, insist on not using condoms when they have sex with their partner. This leads to pregnancies. Sometimes the man doesn't stick around. And then you have a single parent. This happens a lot, depending on your community. So, is it a social stigma or is it a social norm? It's hard to say. Moving on, though, societal pressures can make single women feel ashamed to be pregnant, or in some cases, even afraid of what others will do to them. This can drive people to getting an abortion to escape the stigma. Can it? I always thought that women who wanted to have an abortion do so because they don't want the child for either financial, or they were raped, or they didn't intend to have the child. It's not necessarily because I'm single and I don't want people to look at me funny because I'm single having a child. No, I don't agree with this already, but okay, so pro-lifers, however, argue that women can be proud to be pregnant. Among the pro-life movement, there are people who will provide support and guidance to show there is no shame in pregnancy. Well, there is no shame in being pregnant. I mean, if you intend the pregnancy, you want the pregnancy, there's no shame in that. I don't even think there's shame in being pregnant if you didn't want the child. There's nothing shameful about it. The word shame's wrong. I don't like that. If you don't want the pregnancy, I would think of a different word. Not embarrassment, but because that's too close to shame, but something along the lines of saying, I didn't want this child. I didn't intend this child. Not that I'm embarrassed about it. these things happen, but I don't want this child. Some word that describes that. I'm not thinking of it right now, but okay. So number 4, I don't agree entirely with or at all. I don't remember if I agreed at all. Actually, I don't think at all. We'll just go with that. I was just talking about this too. Okay, so abortion is against the right to life, is it? Okay. The Declaration of Independence states that everyone has a right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. The key word is life. Abortion denies a potential person the right to life, and therefore is contrary to the vision of the United States, for the United States, set forth by the Declaration of Independence. Okay? I would counter with this. How could a woman who has been raped and impregnated against their will be guaranteed happiness at that point? What if they never intended to have a child? What if they were one of those women who wanted to be childless the rest of their lives because they knew they couldn't be a good mother, right? Yes, you could go, well, they could give up the child for adoption. They could transplant to another woman. I get that, but this goes to my whole thing about this is, what right does the country have to tell another person, in this case a woman, that they must not only receive a child into them, but carry them to term with no right to terminate an unwanted pregnancy? Doesn't a woman have a choice to be pregnant or not? Is the question we're really asking. Do people have a right to live? I would say most people have a right to live. I think we give that right to live away when we commit crimes that deprive other people of life. We give away our rights to live when we do that. Inherently, maybe we do. But it also goes to the question as to when a person becomes a person. Does a person become a person at the moment of conception? Is it at 2 weeks? Is it at 6 months? In order to determine this, we have to actually, study this and figure it out. Unfortunately, a fetus isn't able to talk to us at that moment to say whether they're consciously aware or not, and they see themselves as a person or not, whether they see themselves as alive or not. They're not able to talk. So we have to look at it from a point of view, when does life actually begin? From an outsider point of view. That's the question we must answer before we can say we're depriving life from someone before they've actually become a someone. The thing is, a fetus is not a person, legally speaking, until they are born and given a name and a birth certificate. That's how the government sees it. How a human might see it is different. It's all subjective. I would say, like a best guess, I would say, is a person becomes a person at least maybe 7 months into the pregnancy. I would say that would be to the point where I think that's a person, but they're pending. They don't have a name yet necessarily. They haven't technically been born yet. But at that point, if you've gone 7 months into the pregnancy, that's going to end up being a person more than likely. Not always. Sometimes that pregnancy could terminate too, naturally, because there are naturally sometimes where you have a pregnancy that terminates, and those are called a situation where you have a miscarriage. That's what we call it when a natural abortion occurs. So if we're going to go with the right to life argument, what happened to the right to life to that fetus that was about to be born that was miscarried? What happened to their right to life? Who took that away? Are we going to just say it's natural? Who decides that that's okay? And who's the arbiter of that, right? All right. Anyway, I think point made. Maybe not really well, but I think you get it. I'm no expert on these things. I'm just weighing in as a layman. Okay. Recent studies. Okay. The majority of women are pro-life. How do we know this? Is there a survey that was made of the 300 million in the United States and how many of them are women? Well, if we're going to go like on the 50%, it's more than 50%. It might be 60, but I think there are more women than there are men right now. But let's just say it's 50%. Have we surveyed all 50% of the population who are women to figure this out? I don't know. I'd like to see data on that, but that's pretty bold to say. That's like saying the majority of people believe in aliens. Really? How do we figure that out? By polling people, which if they don't show that, I don't know how they know that. Recent studies show a majority of women in the United States, roughly 60%, are decidedly pro-life. Okay, where's your study? Where's your studies? List them for me so I can look at that. Otherwise, you're just making a statement. While pro-life is sometimes described as anti-women, these numbers would suggest otherwise. If you are a woman, you are pro-life. You no longer need to feel stigmatized as anti-women. Does being pro-choice necessarily equate you to be, there we go with that word again, equate, anti-women? I think I missed the memo on that one. It's funny how society wants to call you something like that and not explain it very well. I don't know how deciding that maybe you don't want to carry that child to term makes you an anti-woman as a woman. If you're a woman, you'd have to explain that to me if you are in that scenario, or if you're a woman that actually agrees with that statement, explain it to me, because I don't get it. Because if a man could get pregnant and I was a man getting pregnant, I wouldn't consider myself to be anti-man for wanting to terminate a pregnancy I didn't want. That would just be anti-pregnancy in that specific scenario, not anti-pregnancy overall or anti my gender. I don't get it. All right, number one. Abortion does not fix the issues surrounding unwanted pregnancies. While the debate about abortion rages on, there is one fact which remains indisputable. Abortion does nothing to address the problems leading to unwanted pregnancies. Does it? Okay, let me think. Does it address the problems leading? No, not necessarily. I think I would agree with that statement. The abortion itself does not address the problem, does not address that there are people who rape people, there are people who have sex underage, unprotected, and have an unwanted pregnancy. Yeah, so I agree so far. Just stopping the pregnancy doesn't address it. While the United States is certainly improving in this area, the lack of proper sex education and access to contraceptives are two of the main factors behind unwanted pregnancy. Okay, that's kind of what I was saying. So if you teach people the consequences of having sex without a condom, two fertile people having sex anyway, there are some who are not fertile and some who are, you can get a pregnancy. If you people know this can happen, which most males and females of certain ages will know this, and they know the risk of what would happen, there would be more of them deciding, well, we need a condom if we're going to do this. But I think it goes beyond this. So I'm of the persuasion of saying you should not have sex with a girl as a male, or if you're a female, have sex with a male without a condom involved, unless you are sure and okay with the fact that you could get a pregnancy. Because sexual intercourse is intended to be used to have a pregnancy. That's the point of it. It's not meant for recreational fun, like the society has turned it into. That's not to say that we can't have our fun with it. I mean, there is room for that for certain people, but the point is that's not the intended function of it for nature. So as long as we are aware that this kind of thing can result in a pregnancy, there should be no problem if you proceed to go ahead without a condom or contraceptives of any protection of any sort, and knowing that you're going to potentially have that if you choose to. You will get a pregnancy possibly, and as long as you're aware of it and you know that's could be the consequence, when it happens, you should be at the point of, okay, I was prepared for this and I want this. Because you should go into it thinking that you might want it or should want it if you're going to go without a condom. That's my personal opinion. That's what I think. If you're going to go without one, that should be your mindset. Because that's what potentially could happen. All right, so there is your pro-life argument, and we will fade back to the logo for a moment, and we will move on to the pro-choice aspect of things. And like last time, I will go ahead and commentate on anything on that as well. But so far, I'm not convinced of the pro-life aspect entirely. I am already on the middle ground on this subject, I believe. I think there are circumstances where it should be allowed, and there are circumstances where it should not be. That's just my feeling on it. And I don't know how the previous website could convince anyone necessarily just based on what it said that pro-life is the correct stance, even though it makes a few good points. All right, so let's go to the pro-choice aspect after we've done the pro-life. All right, so this would be Odyssey. Okay. Bodily autonomy is a fundamental human right and the law. All right. Does it give anything to back that up? Let's see. I shouldn't have to explain this one, but alas, I do. Bodily autonomy means a person cannot be forced to relinquish control over any part of their body and cannot be forced to donate organs, tissue, or blood, even if they're dead. Many people have argued this point, and many others have contested it, stating that bodily autonomy exists for the fetus as well. However, the bodily autonomy of an existing self-sustaining human being is much more imperative than that of the undeveloped, entirely independent grouping of cells that merely has potential to become human. All right. Is that all they have to say? Another bodily argument involving bodily autonomy suggests that by not allowing the option of abortion, you are giving a fetus more rights to a woman's body than herself has. The counter has been, it's simply not giving a woman the right to murder, just as no one else has that right. Let's take a look at as to why that's simply not true. Okay. I think that's their first point. Okay, so let me go back here. I mean, it does make a good point. I mean, this is a debatable thing, right? Does the right of the pre-sustaining human, let's say a woman who was born before, had sex with a man, had a child, does that woman have more right to their own body than the child within them? Or do they have equal right? You know what I mean? It doesn't, because as a male, when I look at it from perspective as a male, let's take another analogy, right? Let's say I'm not pregnant, but let's say I have a sentient, I don't know, let's say tapeworm. Let's say there's a tapeworm inside of me that's sentient. It has like really intelligent thoughts to it, right? It's very, very smart. But it got inside of me, and it grew inside of me because I ate a piece of, I don't know, raw meat or something. But it grew, it got smart, and it's about as smart as I am. I existed before the tapeworm did. It's inside of me. Who has right to my body, the tapeworm or me? I would say I do. It's my body, not the tapeworm's body. It might be a parasite. It might be existing inside of me. But it wasn't there before. I didn't start out there. I think there's an argument to be made. If you exist before the organism inside of your body, you have more right to your body. I think you have a right to your body in general, but if there's two organisms in the body, the organism that existed first should get what's the word I'm looking for? Should get precedence, should be able to be viewed as more favorable than the being inside. That's not to say that tapeworm in my example could be some organism that couldn't be removed from my body and somehow exist outside of it and give it its own independent breathing space. But if it's codependent upon me and I existed before it, I think I have a right to live before that organism does. Don't you? Are you gonna argue that a tapeworm that doesn't exist before I do deserves to live before I do? Are you going to argue that the human being that is carrying that tapeworm, if it's a life or death scenario and you had to save one of us, that you would pick the tapeworm over me? Because let me take it one step further here. What if I'm a Nobel Prize winning scientist who has discovered the cure to cancer, or is about very, very close to doing it? I'm like 2 weeks away, but I get this tapeworm inside of me, and you can save it or you can save me. And I existed first. Obviously, I'm adding another element to this, but who would choose the tapeworm in that example? If you're not going to go with the example of the pre-existing life form, I think that's the only one you should need. But importance to the world is important too. There could be an argument that could be made that maybe, what if the tapeworm was the one that could cure cancer? You know, if I could be assured that this sentient tapeworm that I developed inside my body could cure cancer, but it would kill me, I would gladly give up my life to let the tapeworm cure cancer because it would save a whole lot of other people. So there are a couple ways to look at that. But I don't think anyone could look at simply a woman with a child within them being the cure to cancer or anything like that. Maybe the woman themselves, but I'm not really meaning to equate a child within a mother's womb as a parasite, but there are similarities to it because it's a coexistence going on there. The child can't live without the mother until it's born out and independent on its own. While you have that co-inhabitants there, shouldn't the pre-existing life form get precedence over the secondary one? I don't know. It just seems to me like it should. I kind of agree with this, but I also can see the flip side. There might be circumstances where the mother would say, I'd rather my child survive than me. And that has happened, certainly. Depends on how you look at it. I mean, there's this instinct of parents that they want their kids to outlive them. So I think a mother might sacrifice themselves so that their child could be born. That's not impossible. Anyway, point number 2. Pregnancy is not easy. Well, no one ever said it was. I never heard of anyone saying pregnancy was easy. If you're a woman who said, oh, being pregnant's easy, I would think you're on morphine or some kind of drug. No woman I've ever met said that was easy. You have to know that this one already. Pregnancy takes a physical, emotional, and mental toll on both parents. Probably more so the woman than the male, I would imagine. But the woman in particular, now that's what it just said. Okay, it agrees with me. Between the swollen feet, a growing belly, substantial weight gain, the physical symptoms of the pregnancy can be exhausting. And they're not always something a woman is prepared to go through. Add to that the various and sometimes incredibly difficult complications that can come in any given pregnancy. And you've got yourself a cluster fuck. Oh, this one's not afraid to swear. I like that. Okay, kidding. Not that I don't mind language, or mind it, rather. Why is it okay to force something like this on someone? Why does anyone hear this and think, well, you got yourself to that situation, sucks to suck. And yet a person smokes all their life and develops lung cancer because of it. They aren't told, well, you have to deal with those symptoms because you did it to yourself. Because of the potential for human life is there. Because something that cannot exist outside a woman's body is there. What we're trying to say with this one is, let me try to understand. They're saying because pregnancy sucks, it's okay to have an abortion. Is that what they're trying to say? I guess what I'm getting out of it is that, but no, I don't think that's a good reason. See, I'm trying to be fair about this. I mean, just because something's not easy doesn't necessarily mean you shouldn't do it. I mean, if you wanted a child, just because it's hard on you doesn't mean you shouldn't go through with it. You wanted that child, didn't you? On the other hand, if you didn't want that child, should you be forced to go through something? No, but not necessarily because it's not easy, because you don't want it, because you didn't want the child to begin with. You didn't plan it. I don't know. I guess, the choice argument, right? Should you be allowed to choose? That's what we're talking about. So, point number 2, just because something is not easy doesn't mean you shouldn't do it. Yeah. I don't necessarily agree with that reasoning. What does number 3 got for us here? Let's see. Pregnancy, childbirth, and child rearing is expensive. If you really need proof of this, it's here. Okay. So again, just because all of this is expensive, it's going to cost you a lot of money, you shouldn't do it. Well, again, if you wanted that child, maybe you knew this was going to be expensive to begin with, and you're going to go through with it. If not, you wouldn't. Money should not necessarily factor into it. So no, I don't agree. Number 3 is not a good reason either. Do they have a good reason? Contraceptives are not foolproof. My aunt has fallen pregnant on both the pill and an IUD. A friend of mine has also become pregnant on the patch. I myself became pregnant when I was 17 on something called NuvaRing, though I didn't have an abortion. They say right on the warning label that they're not 100% guaranteed, and yet many pro-lifers have admonished those who have become pregnant on such contraceptives. Okay, so I would agree that contraceptives are not foolproof, but is this a reason why you should get an abortion? That's what this article is supposed to be saying. It's supposed to be convincing you that you should have a choice. I don't think that should necessarily be something that convinces anyone that they should have a choice on anything, just because they're not foolproof. Again, you got to know the risk here. If you know they're not foolproof going in, and even if you don't, you know there's always going to be a risk if you don't have anything that prevents the exchange of fluids, right? The only thing that can do that with any reasonable guarantee, and it's not completely foolproof, is a condom, either a female condom or a male condom, but they can break too. So they're not completely foolproof either. But using these medications, NuvaRings and such, they're not going to be perfect because we're dealing with biology here. So no, I don't think that's a good reason to convince anyone of having a choice. But I will agree that they're not foolproof. So there we go. Saying, well, just stop having sex if you don't want to get pregnant doesn't work. I'm sorry that anyone has done themselves the service of believing that this will help in any way, shape, or form. Sex is not necessarily a part of life unless you're trying to conceive. I will agree. However, if you ever met teenagers or young adults and told them not to have sex, a strong majority of the time, they simply won't listen. Sex is no longer simply done to create life. Couples may have sex for a number of reasons, including to help intimacy blossom or strengthen their bond and just have fun and enjoy each other physically. So saying don't have sex isn't quite valid argument to ban abortion. Well, I would agree that telling people not to have sex is a pretty bad suggestion to prevent pregnancy. You don't just tell them not to, and there's going to be always someone who does. But if you're trying to use this as a reason to support pro-choice argument, again, it comes down to this. Well, if you're going to have sex and you can't be responsible enough to try to do everything you possibly can to prevent a pregnancy, if you don't want one, that's on you. If you still have a pregnancy after that, that's still on you. So, really, I don't know if ironically is the correct way to look at it, but let's just say, ironically, the only way to prevent someone from getting pregnant is to not have sex. If two people don't have sex, there can't be a pregnancy between those two people. So I sort of agree with what they're saying. But I'm not saying that's realistic either, because people do. But you got to know the risks. Like I said, nothing is foolproof, not even a condom. If you're going to have sex, you could get someone pregnant. It's that simple. All right. 6, access to contraceptives and education about both sex and contraceptives is faulty. There are many reasons someone might not be able to access contraceptives. whether it be financial, educational, or the lack of availability in the area. The education on contraceptives between condoms, the pill, and the IUDs is not comprehensive and needs to be changed in order to allow every human on Earth to make the choice for themselves, whether or not those options are right for them. All right, so in other words, give everyone education on what options there are to prevent a pregnancy if you're going to have sex. I don't necessarily disagree with that. I think for the most part, people kind of do know this already, and maybe they are getting taught these things. Maybe some people just don't care, which could be the answer, but in any case, if that's the solution, someone needs to get on that. That's all I'm saying about that. I don't know. I think education on this sort of thing would be a good thing, but I'm not so sure we don't already do that and not already do it well enough. They don't think we are, so I don't know. The foster care system is messed up. There's no better way to say it. The foster care system is extensively flawed. There are few requirements to be a foster parent, and there are as follows. You must be over age 25. Okay. Why 25? What if there's a perfectly acceptable parent of 24? Or 22, 23, 20, maybe even 18. Let's say 18. Maybe there might be a good parent who's age 18 that's very mature. Why 25? I'd be interested to know how they came up with that. Pass a criminal background check. Okay. Obviously, we don't want a criminal to necessarily raise a child, but what if they're an ex-felon, right? What if they've reformed? They come out of prison, they've reformed, they're good people now, right? Don't they deserve the chance to raise a child if they want one? Just because of their past, they're going to be saying, no, you're not good. No. I don't know. I guess it's, I guess I can see where they're coming from on that, but I also go, people should be given a second chance and to prove themselves and everything. Have a regular source of income to support your own monthly expenses. Okay, I agree. If you can't support yourself, how can you support a child? That's reasonable. Have at least one available bedroom. Yeah, okay. But you don't want your child sleeping in the same bedroom you're sleeping in. I would say 2. Have a car, valid car insurance, and clean DMV report. Why do you need a car necessarily? Like, what if the child doesn't need to be transported via car to a school and you could walk them there yourself, or it's within walking distance? I don't know. I can kind of see that point, but have some flexibility in your schedule to accommodate the foster children's court-ordered visits, therapy, or medical appointments. I don't see how that's unreasonable. Your home must pass a state-required home safety check. Do they require home state safety checks for non-foster parents? If they don't, maybe they should, if to be fair about it then. Just saying. You must supervise foster children, including teens, when they are not in school or in supervised activities. Well, duh. I mean, isn't that what a parent is supposed to do of any type? Like, if you're a foster parent or a adoptive parent, shouldn't you supervise the kid that you've adopted or fostered when they're not in school or in any activities? I mean, I think that goes without saying. Otherwise, what are you doing being a parent? You may be single or married. Okay. Why is that a requirement? That shouldn't be on there at all because it's either or. Most people either are single or married. That's okay, I don't get it. You may own or rent your home or apartment. Again, most people either own or rent their home or apartment. So these two, as far as am concerned, can be stricken from a requirement because they are not a requirement. They are, I don't know what they are, but if we're going to say it's a requirement, they would have to be one or the other. It would have to say you must be married or you must own a home. If you're going to give an option, that's not a requirement. Unless you're going to exclude some other option from that, which that is not apparently listed on here because, like, single or married? Okay, there's separation, but technically separated is kind of a single sort of thing. It's like in between married. Divorced is single. So, okay, you can't, I'm overthinking this, but you can't both rent and own a home at the same time, can you? I don't know. Or an apartment. I don't think anyone owns an apartment. They might own an apartment complex. Okay. I'm going to leave that up there for a second, but I'm not reading the rest of that. We're moving on. I don't think we need to keep going on that, but it's kind of like, I get it, but it doesn't seem that unreasonable on a couple of them. I care what happens to a child after the mother is forced to carry them to term against her wishes. I care that adoptions aren't easy. I care that they're financially difficult for the parents, psychologically difficult for all and those involved. I care that the foster system needs to be fixed. We just talked about that. I care that a child who is born to parents who did not want children, who do not care for that child, who cannot afford another option, and have a good life, a life that they deserve. I care that these things are happening every day because a woman is told she couldn't or shouldn't murder a grouping of cells that she's immoral and should be ashamed of herself, even if she was raped and does not want to face the trauma of carrying that fetus to term. I care, and you should too. All right, I sort of agree with the sentiment there, but I disagree with this term, a grouping of cells. We all are a grouping of cells, are we not? Our bodies are comprised of cells. To reduce us to that is to regulate us to, or diminish us rather than say what we truly are. We are a life form. We're not just a grouping of cells. That would be one way to describe us, but that's not what we all are. Now, we can make the argument that a fetus, unborn child, whatever term you want to use, is much more than a simple grouping of cells themselves. But as they are unborn, as they have not been given their identity yet, as we do not know if they have consciousness yet, as we do not know what they think or feel, what exactly is an unborn child? At which stage are they to the point where we think they are conscious? We don't know. But again, it comes back to, we know that the woman is thinking. We know they are conscious. If it is to the point where they want to terminate a pregnancy, and it is early enough, and they have not considered other options, maybe we ought to say, okay. And even if they haven't considered other options, maybe we should say it's okay. Ultimately, I say it should be a choice. I think. None of this is convincing me of that, but I just think a person that is existing here in the now, that hasn't been born, that has been born rather, should be able to make the choice for themselves. There should be some regulation on that. We don't want to abort a child that has developed in the womb for 7 months, for instance. There are exceptions to everything, though. If you're going to save the mother, and the chances are, if you tried to save that unborn child, they wouldn't survive because they're early. And you could save the mother, for instance. If there's the choice between the two, you'd probably save the mother, not the child. Who knows, though? That's difficult to decide, but I'm just saying early termination would be preferable. How early that is, that has to be decided. And I think that's up to both those who regulate and the mother themselves to a certain extent. I also think the father should have rights in this too, even though they aren't the body involved. But I do think they should be able to say whether or not a termination is being done. They should be consulted. They should have a vote in it. But the final determining vote should be the mother because it's their body. But you can't, I don't think you should just, if you're the mother, like the father of the child, if they are involved with you, for instance, if it's a rapist, for instance, maybe they give away their rights if they raped you. But if it's a willing father, you shouldn't, like, say there's a couple, right? They have sex. They have a child that develops from the sex, and then the father is expecting a child and wants that child. The mother all of a sudden changes their mind and doesn't want it. Shouldn't the father have some say in that? They did contribute to that. They were going into it wanting a child. They were willingly participating in that. I don't know what the right answer is at that point. I think maybe finding another, like I said, I talked about it earlier, maybe having that unwanted pregnancy for that one mother go into someone else's womb that wants a child, then that father could raise that child as a single parent. That could be an option. That way you don't have to give the child up for adoption if the mother doesn't want the child. I don't know. There's got to be some options there. I don't think this is an instance where I think abortion maybe is not right if one of the parents wants it and the other one doesn't. Especially if it's the mother who doesn't want it. A mother's got a right too to their body. I know it's a hard one. That's why this is a tough topic to talk about. I don't know if I'm going to find a true middle ground here at the end, but we're going to try. We're going to think about it. Okay. The world is becoming overpopulated. Not going to read all this. I think the idea is like, okay, so we should not be having a lot of children born, and we should be killing more children before they're born because the world's getting overpopulated is basically what it's trying to say, I'm guessing, or advocating for, which I don't agree with. I think somebody said if we took the entire population of the entire world, we could fit them within the Grand Canyon. We have like 9 billion people? Something like that. I don't know. But we could all fit in the Grand Canyon. So there's plenty of space on the planet still. And there's people that die every day and every year. The population is growing, though. There's no doubt about that. But that doesn't mean we should genocide a bunch of unborn children. Because if we don't have any more children born, the species could die off eventually if we don't have enough fresh children to rejuvenate the population. Because even though it appears to be huge now, some of that population can be the elderly, definitely. People can die at any point in the year. They can die every day. You never know. So overpopulation is no reason to advocate abortion, necessarily. That's kind of one step away from genocide, in my opinion. So I don't agree there. It's none of my business what anyone else does with their body. Let's see. King James Version of the Bible. Judge not, that ye not be judged, for with what judgment ye judge, ye shall be judged, and with what measure ye met, it shall be measured to you again. And why thee beholdest thou the mote that is my brother's eye, but considerest not the beam that is thine own eye? Let's see. I have no right to use my beliefs to justify forcing them on someone else. Neither does anyone else. It is wonderful to have beliefs. It's wonderful to have guidelines for yourself. Radicals. Sorry, I'm not reading all this, but I think the gist of it is you do what you want with your body. I'll do what you want with mine. I sort of agree with this too. In fact, I really agree in some respects, you know. I mean, if you're going to look at it from gender to different gender, like what right does a man have to tell a woman what to do with their body? None whatsoever. What woman has a right to tell a man what to do with his body? None whatsoever. What man to man has a right to tell what another man does to their body? None. We have a choice of what to do. It's like it goes with this health thing too. People who want to advocate forcibly vaccinating people for the public good, for instance. This is a different topic, but it's kind of related. Like, why don't you take care of your health? I'll take care of mine, and let that other person take care of theirs, and so on and so forth. You want to get vaccinated? Go ahead. Go ahead and get vaccinated. They want to get vaccinated? They can get vaccinated. If I want to, I'll want to. If I don't, I don't. I'll take the risk if there is any. We make our own decisions. We look at our own education. We have our own education. We have our own viewpoints. So blaming me in the vaccine case for someone else getting sick is ridiculous, because they could have protected themselves too. They had the choice. They didn't want a vaccine. Why am I responsible if I didn't also get vaccinated for their health? I'm responsible for my own, just as you are. And a woman's responsible for their bodies, just as a man is responsible for their body. Regulation on what we do with our bodies should not be the government's business, which is why the situation in Texas is appalling to me, because I understand it goes against Roe v. Wade, which was a decision that basically said a woman has a right to do with what they want with their body in regards to this topic. I don't see how in the modern days that the United States and any state in the United States could have that kind of thing going on. And then if you send it to the Supreme Court, they would just ignore it, because they already ruled on this a long time ago. I thought the federal opinion overrode the state opinion, but maybe it doesn't. Obviously it doesn't, because a state can get away with that. And my advice to anyone who disagrees with that in Texas would be to max exodus, essentially move to a different state where they're favorable to your rights, and get out of Texas. However, maybe that's the wrong way to look at it, because if you enjoy your home, maybe you should stick around and try to change it back. Get involved in politics and protest. That could be too. Anyway, let's get out of this and let's go ahead and, how long have we gone? Oh, about an hour 19. Not as long as the other one that we just did, but I think we've exhaustively covered that as much as we can using the top 10 list that we tend to have done so far, which is only one other episode. So anyway, it's still an accurate statement. Forgive me, it's late at night again. So what is the middle ground on this particular issue of abortion? Pro-life versus pro-choice. I think this is just me. What I think is basically, all right, there are certain circumstances, excuse me, if I can get the word out, where it is proper to have an abortion. I think I've already hinted at this. Early enough in the pregnancy, we need to determine when it is early enough for that sort of thing to make sense, okay? We also need to determine when it is and find a way to determine when it is that that particular fetus is technically a life form and is a person. That would help us determine when it's early enough. I do not advocate that we terminate pregnancies in the late stages, months into it. If you don't want the pregnancy, you're probably going to know this very early on. I also think, though, the woman who is either going to carry that baby or not should have that choice on what to do. And I also think that the other parent, the father, should also have a say in this, even though it's not their body. But I think they should because they're both parents to that child or potential child. Because it's not the father's body, though, I think their decision should be like more or less to say, let's put that in a different willing mother and then I'll raise the child. That should be the result of that. I'm not saying the father should force that unwilling mother to have that child, though, just to be clear. But if the father's going to raise a protest about it, that's what should be done. The abortion portion of this should come as a last resort. It should be the last thing that we do. We should look at all other options first. I'm not saying take it off the table, but I'd say look at other things. Find a different mother who's willing to receive that fetus. Maybe carry that fetus out to term as another option and then go through the adoption system. Or find someone that you know who wants a child and say, hey, you want this child? You can adopt this child. Don't even put them in the system. Get to know someone independently and then go through the legal means to get them adopted that way. There are options to do this. You don't have to go through the government to do it. You can do independent means. Maybe someone you know in your family, for instance, is barren. They've always wanted a child. You can give them yours. Just saying. And again, like I said, a single father might want to take care of that child if the mother doesn't want it. Basically, that's your middle ground, is compromise on both sides and try to meet in the middle on this. Because I don't agree that it's okay to willingly just outright kill anything that could be alive. But I also see that there may be no other choice sometimes. But it should always be the last resort. Because it should be preferable, like we look at in life as already. Life is preferable to death. We don't necessarily generally want to die. We want to live. So if we look at an unborn fetus, maybe they would feel the same if they could feel the same, and maybe they do feel the same. We don't know. But we should assume, like us, they have a preference for life. So we should do everything we can to ensure they get that chance. But if we've exhausted all options, maybe then we should consider the termination or the abortion. But only if it's early enough in stages of that pregnancy. And generally speaking, most women are going to know pretty early on whether they want a child or not. They could change their mind later. That's not impossible. But if they do, and we have set aside certain rules in place for when it's legally allowed for them to do that, without, for abortions, for instance, then they cannot have one, and they must do one of those other things, legally speaking, after a certain point. I think that's what should be done, but we have to agree on when that is. Because the minute that the government got involved with this sort of thing and this became a topic, it became clear that there should be some regulation on it to a certain extent, even though it's preferable that the woman get a choice on what they do. As a man, I wouldn't want someone telling me what to do with my body, but I also understand if I had myself in the position of a woman and I was pregnant, there should be something that says when it's right to do this and when it's not right to do it, legally speaking. I'm not talking about the moral implications necessarily, because if you're going to go off of the fact that it could be a life form, at the moment of conception, there is no right there. It's only wrong at that point. At any point when you kill that, it would be wrong. Because if you go off of the Bible, murder is wrong no matter when it is and who it is you kill. And is that a sort of murder? To a certain extent, it would be. Anyway, I think that about sums up my thoughts on this. And we've gone about as long as the other one anyway. So, there you go. It's up to you to decide. What do you think about abortion? Pro-life versus pro-choice? You listen to this, leave your comments in the comments section, and don't forget to subscribe and spread the word about the channel. This has been The Middle Grounds. We'll catch you in the next episode. Till next time.